30 years after he said it the first time. Brett Kessler found me by the punch bowl at our class reunion, looked me up and down in my old jacket, and said the same thing he used to say in the hallways of Caldwell High. "Maddox, tell me you're still pumping gas somewhere." The room laughed. The way a room laughs when the loud man wants it to. I smiled and let him have it. I did not tell him that the company closing a deal in town that Monday, the one he had spent all week bragging he was going to charm, belonged to me. I did not tell him that by Monday afternoon, in a very real and very quiet way, Brett Kessler would in fact be working for the kid he was so sure would be pumping his gas. He had one weekend left to keep digging. He dug the whole thing. This is the story of the reunion, where the gas pump joke finally landed on the man who told it. My name is Glenn Maddox. I am 51 years old. I grew up poor in Caldwell, Tennessee, a mill town tucked in a fold of the hills where everybody knew everybody and most folks knew exactly how little my family had. These days I am not poor. I run a holding company that buys and steadies mid-sized industrial firms across the southeast, the kind of plain, necessary businesses that make valves and ductwork and the parts that hold a building together. I have done well. I have done better than anyone in that gymnasium would have guessed, which is precisely how I like it. Because I do not look the part, and I have never tried to. I drive a 15-year-old truck. I wear a canvas jacket older than some of my managers. When I am not in a meeting that requires otherwise, I look like exactly what I started as, a working man from a mill town, and working men from mill towns are easy to underestimate. I have built a good deal of my life on letting people underestimate me, and then quietly being right. If you have ever had somebody decide who you were at 17 and refuse to update the file for the rest of your life, stay with me, because this one is going to feel good, and tell me in the comments about the person who said you would never amount to anything, and whether they ever got to see how wrong they were. I want to hear it. Here is the part Brett did not know, and the part you get to hold the whole way through, which is what makes the next 3 days worth watching. I had not planned to come back to Caldwell at all. I had skipped every reunion for 30 years, because the town and I had an understanding, which was that it had been glad to see the back of me, and I had been glad to give it. But two things happened at once. The first was that my company spent 6 months negotiating to buy a firm called Hartwell Industrial, a ductwork manufacturer with 3 plants, one of them on the edge of my own hometown, employing 400 people who had nowhere else to go if it folded. The deal was set to close that Monday. The second thing was that the reunion invitation came the same week, and I sat with it a long time. And I realized the only reason I had stayed away for 30 years was that a part of me was still afraid of a 17-year-old's voice. So I decided to drive up early, close my deal, and walk into that gymnasium as the man I had actually become, instead of the boy they remembered. I could not say a word about the Hartwell deal. A purchase that size lives under confidentiality until it closes, and the seller's lawyers had papered every inch of it. As far as anyone in Caldwell knew, some out-of-town buyer they had never met was taking over the plant on Monday. They did not connect that faceless buyer to Glenn Maddox, the janitor's boy. Why would they? I had spent 30 years making sure my name stayed off the front of things. I drove into Caldwell the Thursday before, the long way, down off the interstate and onto Route 9, because I wanted to see it before it saw me. The Gulf station was a tire shop now, the old pumps gone, but the little overhang my father had stood under in every kind of weather was still there, sagging a little. I slowed down as I passed it. I did not stop. Some things you only need to see once to know they are still standing inside you. The town had shrunk the way mill towns do. A few more empty storefronts on Main, the hardware store gone to a dollar chain. But the bones of it were the same, and so, I found, were the feelings. I checked into the one decent motel on the edge of town, and I sat on the end of the bed with my good suit in its bag and my old jacket on my back. 51 years old and worth more than the whole county. and I felt a 17-year-old's nerves about walking into a gymnasium. That is the thing nobody warns you about doing well. It does not reach all the way back. There is always a version of you, 17 and broke and certain you are nothing, who never got the memo. And sometimes you have to drive a long way to go and tell him in person. That is really why I came. The deal was just the reason I let myself believe it was. And there is the wound. So you understand why this was never only about money for me. My father was Earl Maddox. For most of my childhood, he worked nights at the mill and days at the Gulf station out on Route 9, pumping gas and fixing whatever rolled in, because 2 jobs was what it took. He wore a grey work shirt with an oval patch over the heart that said Earl in red thread, and he wore it with the kind of dignity that has nothing to do with money. He was the most decent man I have ever known. And in a small town, the children of the comfortable families learn early who the help is, and they learn it from their parents. And Brett Kessler learned it better than most. Brett was the quarterback, the mayor's nephew, golden and cruel in the specific way that only a boy with no consequences can be. He found out my father pumped gas, and he made it my whole identity. For 4 years, I was the gas station kid. He would hold up 2 fingers at me in the hall, like he was signaling for a fill-up. The line he settled on, the one he repeated until the whole class said it, was simple. "You'll be pumping my gas someday, Maddox." He said it to me at my locker. He said it to me at lunch. He said it to me, grinning, the night of junior prom, when I showed up in a suit my mother had altered from one of my father's, and he announced to the room that the help had wandered in through the wrong door. What made it stick was not the cruelty itself. Boys are cruel. What made it stick was that there was no floor under me when it happened, no soft place to land. Because we had nothing. And when you have nothing, an insult about what you have is an insult about everything you are. I wore the same 3 shirts all 4 years. I qualified for the lunch the school gave the poor kids, and Brett made sure everyone knew which line I stood in. I did my homework by the light of the Gulf station while my father worked the pumps, because the power at home got shut off more than once. And one night, Brett drove by and saw me out there doing my algebra on the curb and rolled down his window and laughed and told his friends the gas station kid even did his homework at the gas station. I told my father about it exactly once, the algebra night, because I came home with my face hot and he could see it. He did not get angry, which surprised me. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table, still in the grey shirt with his name on it, smelling of gasoline and a long day, and he said a thing I did not understand until I was much older. He said, "Son, there is no shame in any honest work, and any man who tries to put shame on it is telling you about himself, not about you." He tapped the patch on his chest, the one that said Earl, and he said, "The dignity is in the work, not in what some boy thinks of it." Then he made me finish my algebra. I got an A on that test. I have never forgotten either the grade or the lecture, and you are going to hear that line from him again before this is over. I left Caldwell at 18 with $40 and my father's spare work shirt folded in a duffel bag, the one with the Earl patch, because I could not explain to myself why I wanted it, but I knew I could not leave it behind. I have kept it for 33 years. It rides in the glove box of my truck. It rode there into the parking lot of the Caldwell Country Club the Friday night the reunion began. The reunion was a weekend affair, a casual mixer Friday and the big dinner Saturday. All of it held at the country club that, when I was a boy, my father was not considered fine enough to enter through the front. I drove up in my old truck and parked it among the German sedans, and I walked in through the front door, which I will admit took me a moment longer than it should have. Brett found me within the hour. Age had not been kind to him, and I do not say that with pleasure, only as fact. The golden boy had gone heavy and red-faced, the handsome blurred into something harder. But the eyes were the same, and they lit up when they landed on me like a man finding a favorite old toy. He came over with 2 of his old crowd in tow, the same satellites, grayer now, and he sized up my jacket and my boots in one practiced sweep, and he said it. "Maddox, tell me you're still pumping gas somewhere." And there it was. 30 years, and the man had one joke, and he had been saving it for me. I want to be honest about the temptation, because it was real. I had, in my coat pocket, the power to end his whole performance with one sentence. "I am the buyer closing on the Hartwell plant Monday. The one you've been telling everyone you're going to charm into keeping you." It was right there, smooth and loaded. I did not say it. Partly because the deal was sealed by law, but partly because I have learned that a man who answers a small insult by reaching for his biggest weapon has already let the small man win the most important thing, which is his composure. So I smiled, and I shook his hand, and I said it was good to see him too, and I let Brett Kessler believe he had won the opening round. He always did mistake my silence for surrender. It is a mistake that has cost a number of people a great deal over the years. If you are enjoying this, do me that favor and drop a comment about the person who underestimated you. We will get to Monday. First, you need to see how far Brett was willing to take it. Because a man does not change in 30 years just because his hair does, and Brett spent the whole weekend proving it. He worked the room like a politician working a room he was losing. I watched it over those 2 evenings, the way you watch weather you have seen before. Brett needed everyone to know he was somebody. He talked loudly and constantly about his position at Hartwell Industrial, regional sales manager, a title he wore like a crown, and about the deal, the big sale, the new owners coming Monday, and how he was going to walk in there and make himself indispensable and probably come out running the place. He told it to anyone who would stand still, and every few minutes, like a man returning to a favorite room, he came back to me. He told the gas station joke to people who had not heard it in 3 decades and made sure they remembered. He asked me, loudly, whether I still lived in the trailer park, and seemed disappointed when a classmate mentioned I had a business of some kind, which Brett waved off with a laugh. "Probably changes oil," he said. "Honest work. Maddox. Nothing to be ashamed of." He clapped me on the shoulder when he said it, hard, the way a man does when the gesture is the opposite of what it pretends to be. There was a moment Friday night that told me everything about the kind of man the years had made him. A group of us had drifted into the old stories, the way classes do, and someone brought up Coach Demby, who had died a few years back. A hard old man who had been kind to exactly 2 students in his career, and I had been lucky enough to be one of them. I said something about how Demby had let me into the weight room early so I could lift before the other boys arrived, which was his quiet way of keeping me from being cornered in the locker room, though he never said so. It was a soft memory, and the table received it softly. Brett could not allow that. He could not allow me to have one good thing in that building that he had not authored. So he laughed and said Demby only let me in early because the janitor's kid needed somewhere to be that did not cost money. And then he did an impression of my father, a slow shuffle, a tired mumble, a man too worn down to stand up straight. And he did it well enough that 2 people laughed before they caught themselves. I sat there and held my glass, and I thought about my father coming home at 2 in the morning with his hands cracked from the cold pumps, and about how easy it is for a man who has never been tired like that to perform it for a laugh. I said nothing, but I was no longer thinking about Monday as just a closing date. The one person in that room who never once played along was June. June Hadley. She was then June Carter now, a widow, a teacher, the kind of woman a small town does not deserve and somehow gets anyway. At 17, she had been the only person at Caldwell High who treated the janitor's son like a person. She was not popular enough to make it cost her nothing, and she did it anyway. The week after Brett's prom night performance, when I was eating lunch alone behind the field house because I could not stand the cafeteria, June walked all the way out there with her tray and sat down next to me and talked about nothing at all until I could breathe again. She never mentioned it. She just made sure I was not alone in it. I have thought about that lunch more times than she will ever know. She found me Friday night, and her whole face opened up, and she hugged me like the 30 years were nothing. She taught at Caldwell High now, she told me, ran the shop and trades program there, the one that gave the kids who were not going to college a way to make a living with their hands. She told me, laughing, that the program was being cut at the end of the year because the county had no money for it, and that she was raising scrap funds at a bake sale to keep one lathe running. And she told it the way decent people tell you about their losses, like it was just weather and she would manage. I did not say much. I just filed it away somewhere important. She walked me down to the school the next afternoon, before the dinner, to show me the shop. It was a low brick building behind the gym, and inside it smelled of sawdust and cutting oil, and there was exactly one working lathe and a row of others with handwritten out-of-order signs taped to them. She had 30-some kids in that program, she said, most of them from the same side of town I came from, kids whose families could not picture college and could not afford it if they could. She walked me past a workbench where a boy of 16 had built a small cedar chest, dovetailed at the corners, sanded smooth as glass, and she touched it like it was made of something more valuable than cedar. "That's Duane's," she said. "His mama cleans rooms out at the Highway Motel. He's going to graduate able to walk onto any job site in this county and earn a real wage, and they want to take that away from him to save a line on a budget." I stood in that shop, in the smell of it, and I thought about a curb outside a gas station and a boy doing algebra by the pump lights. And I understood with great clarity that I was going to do something about that lathe, and the out-of-order signs, and the line on the budget, and that I was not going to make a speech about it. June was still talking about her bake sale. I let her, and I filed the whole room away next to the other things I was carrying into Monday. Saturday was the dinner, and Saturday was when Brett went too far, which a man like Brett will always do if you give him an audience and enough to drink. He had been drinking since the cocktail hour. During that cocktail hour, he had already started in. He stood by the bar with the same 2 satellites and held up 2 fingers at me across the room when I came in, the old fill-up signal, and grinned to see if I remembered. I remembered. He asked, loud, whether the truck in the lot with the mismatched tailgate was mine, and when I said it was, he told the bar that some things never change, and that he supposed not everybody was cut out for more. A woman I had not known well in school, Patricia, drifted over to me a few minutes later with 2 glasses of wine and put one in my hand without being asked. She said, quietly, that he had been like this all weekend to everyone, that he had cornered her husband about a loan, that there were rumors he was in real trouble, and that she was sorry, because she remembered how he used to be to me, and had never said anything back then, and had always wished she had. I thanked her. I told her it was a long time ago. It was not a long time ago. Not really. But it is the kind of thing you say to let a decent person set down a weight they have carried. And she had carried that one long enough. By the time the plates were cleared, he was loud at the center table, holding court, and he decided the entertainment for the evening would be me. He called across 2 tables, asking if I remembered the prom, asking if I still had my daddy's old suit. The table near him laughed, uneasy now, because there is a point where even an audience starts to feel the cruelty. Brett did not feel it. He stood up, glass in hand, and he asked the room, loud, whether anybody had gassed up lately, because they might have been served by a Maddox. And then he looked right at me and said it one more time, the line, the whole reason he had come over. "You'll be pumping my gas someday, Maddox." And then he turned it on June, because June had put her hand on my arm, and Brett never could stand to be the only person not getting what he wanted. He said something about the gas station boy and the teacher who couldn't afford a new dress, some ugly little joke that landed in the quiet wrong, and June's face went still in a way that told me she had spent her own 30 years getting talked to like that by men who had stopped growing at 18. That was the moment I came the closest. I had the whole thing loaded. And this time it was not about me. I am the man who owns the company that signs your check on Monday. Brett. And I would think very hard, right now, about the next word you say to that woman. Every bit of it true. Every bit of it mine to make so. And I felt my hand go to my coat pocket, where there was nothing but the truth. I did not stand up, not because I was afraid, but because June did not need me to make a scene on her behalf, and because the deal was not closed until Monday, and a man who detonates the truth a day early to win a dinner-table moment has spent his best card on the cheapest hand. So I did the harder thing. I put my hand over June's on my arm, and I looked at Brett, and I said, evenly, loud enough for the near tables, that June ran the best program in that school, and that he should be careful which teachers he insulted. Because half the men in this room could read a tape measure, only because of people like her. It was not a threat, it was just true. And true has a weight that drunk does not. And Brett, not used to being answered at all, sat back down. The table exhaled. June squeezed my arm once, hard, and did not say anything, which is how I knew it had cost her more than she would show. I learned how far Brett had fallen later that same night, and I learned it the way you learn most true things, by accident, in a parking lot. I had gone out to my truck for some air, and Brett was out there too, alone now, the crowd gone, leaning against a fender with his phone to his ear, and he did not see me in the dark. He was not the man from the dinner table. His voice was thin and scared and pleading. He was talking to his wife. He was telling her that the new owners came Monday and that everybody knew the regional managers were the first to go in a sale, and that he had to land this. He had to. Because they were 2 payments behind, and the second mortgage was due, and he did not know what they would do if he lost the position. He said he was going to charm the buyer. He said it twice, the way frightened men say a thing as if saying it could make it so. By the end, he was almost whispering, and Brett Kessler had never in his life been a man who whispered. I will be straight with you about what that did and did not do. It did not buy back 1 hour of the 4 years he gave me, or 1 ounce of what he had just done to June, or my father's dignity that he had used as a punchline in front of the whole town, twice in 1 weekend. It did not soften me into letting any of it go, but it stopped me from enjoying Monday the way I might have if Brett had simply been a monster. He was not a monster. He was a frightened, shrinking man who had peaked at 18 and spent 30 years trying to feel that tall again by standing on whoever was beneath him. And now the ground was going out from under his own feet, and he could not see that the man he had spent the weekend mocking was the one holding the rope. The fear was real. So was the cruelty. A man is judged by what he does to the people he thinks cannot touch him. And Brett had just spent a whole weekend showing me, in detail, exactly who he was. I drove back to the motel that night, and I sat in the truck in the dark lot a while before I went in. I opened the glove box and took out my father's shirt, the grey one, soft from 33 years of being folded and unfolded, and I held it in my lap and read his name in the dim light off the motel sign. Earl. I was not angry anymore, exactly. I was something quieter and older than angry. I was a man deciding, deliberately, what kind of owner he was going to be at 9 the next morning, when the cruelty of a frightened classmate would be sitting across a table from 30 years of consequences. I folded the shirt back up. I had already decided. I had decided, I think, at that kitchen table when I was 16. I was going to be my father's son about it, which, for Brett Kessler, was going to be both much better and much worse than revenge. Monday came. The closing was at the Hartwell plant on the edge of town, in a glass-walled conference room that looked out over the floor where 400 people made their living. I closed the purchase at 9 in the morning. By 10, I owned the place, and at 10:30, the regional managers were brought up, one at a time, to meet the new owner and learn where they stood. Brett came in, straightening his tie, wearing the good suit and the salesman's smile he had been rehearsing all weekend, ready to charm the faceless out-of-town money. He got 3 steps into the room before he saw who was sitting at the head of the table, in a suit now, with a grey work shirt folded over the chair beside him, an oval patch over the heart that said Earl in faded red thread. I have been in a lot of quiet rooms. I will remember that one. I watched Brett try to fit the gas station and the prom and the punch bowl and 30 years of that one joke into the man the lawyers had just called the owner of Hartwell Industrial. I watched the math come out wrong every way he tried it. His mouth opened and nothing came out. And the salesman's smile slid off his face and did not come back. I did not gloat. I want you to hear that. Because the temptation of a moment like that is enormous, and I had earned the right to every cruel thing I could have said. And I said none of them. There is more power in restraint than Brett Kessler ever understood, and I had 30 years of it. I told him to sit down, and he sat. I told him the truth, plainly, that I had bought the company, that I had spent the weekend at the reunion listening to him tell the whole town how he was going to charm me, that I knew exactly who he was, because I had known since I was 14 years old. And then I told him the part that mattered, the part that was never about him at all. I told him the 400 jobs on that floor were safe, because the people doing the work had done nothing wrong, and I had not bought the place to gut it. I told him that the plant would keep running and keep its people, and that he could keep a job there too, an honest one, on the floor or in a territory, earned like everyone else's. But not the title, not the crown. A man who had spent a weekend using his small authority to humble a teacher and resurrect a 30-year-old joke about another man's father was not going to be handed authority over anyone in a company of mine. I told him he would answer to a sales director I was bringing in, and that the director's job would include deciding, over the coming year, whether Brett Kessler had it in him to be the kind of man who could be trusted with people, because I had seen no evidence of it yet, and I was giving him the chance to find some. He asked me, quietly, why I was keeping him at all, after everything. It was the first honest thing he had said to me in 30 years. I told him the truth, that a man named Earl Maddox pumped gas for the people of this county for 20 years and never once made a single one of them feel small for needing him, and that I was not going to dishonor my father by becoming, in my hour of power, the thing that had made his son's childhood hell. I told Brett he could keep his job and his house and his payments, and that he could spend the next 30 years deciding whether to do anything decent with the chance. Then I told him we were done, and he stood up, and for the first time since I was 14 years old, Brett Kessler had nothing to say to me at all. I will spare you the rest of the bookkeeping, because the satisfying part of a thing like this was never the paperwork. The plant runs today. Most of the 400 are still there. Brett works a sales territory 2 counties over and, by the accounts that reach me, has been quiet and careful, and is perhaps slowly becoming a smaller threat to the people around him, which is the best that can be said of some men, and is not nothing. The sales director I brought in, a steady woman named Carol, who had come up the hard way herself, told me a few months later that Brett was, to her surprise, turning out to be one of her better closers when he was not allowed an audience to perform for. Take away the crown, it seems, and there was a competent salesman underneath it who had simply never been required to be anything but a bully. I do not know if it lasts. I am not in the business of fixing men like Brett. I am only in the business of making sure they no longer get to stand on the people I am responsible for. What he builds on the ground I left him is his to build. Before I left town, I drove out to Caldwell High and found June in the shop room, and I endowed the trades program she runs, quietly, permanently, in my father's name. The Earl Maddox Trades Program. There is a plaque now, by the door of the shop, and on it, under his name, is a line June asked if she could add, and I told her she could. It says, "The dignity is in the work." June cried when the lathe got delivered, the new one, and a second one beside it. And I had to leave the room, because I am not made of stone, whatever Brett Kessler thinks. People ask me whether the look on Brett's face was the good part. The moment the gas station kid turned out to own the building, I tell them the truth. The look was fine. But the good part is a shop room full of kids in a mill town learning to make a living with their hands, under a plaque with my father's name on it, by a door that the comfortable families once said his kind should not walk through. Earl Maddox got the front door after all. It only took 33 years and the worst weekend of Brett Kessler's life. If you made it all the way here, you already know what I am going to ask. Tell me about the one who said you would never amount to anything, and what you would say to them now. Subscribe so the next quiet man in the old jacket finds his way to you. And if there was ever a June in your life, somebody who walked all the way across a field just so you would not have to eat alone, go find them this week and tell them you remember. Some of them never knew what that lunch was worth.